are economic growth linked to infrastructure development. For instance, if there's a new highway that's built, and it doesn't have to be a highway, it could be a railway, or even going back historically, like the Erie Canal back in 1825 or whenever it was started. Any kind of infrastructure and the impact of that, how we look at economic growth and how it comes about. So typically, there are three stages that the economy kind of goes through when you have a new infrastructure. Again, highway, trail, rail, whatever. So the first is what we call the substitution phase. This is where people or traffic start using the new infrastructure, but they give up on the old infrastructure. So people switch from the old. So if we're talking a highway, when the interstate was built, people switched from the old system of Highway 66 and all these other things towards the newer interstate. So that's the substitution phase. The second phase is this transition phase. This is where, as the population increases, the demand for most things increase, including transportation and specifically this new transportation. And finally, we have the development stage where the highway or the freeway or the interstate or the high-speed rail or whatever it is the major determinant of economic activity. So you have all economic activity coming around it. So again, going back to the interstate, this is where, at each exit, you would have maybe a gas station. And then you might have a restaurant. Then you might have a lodging. And then to support that, you might have construction, home construction, schools, and all these other kinds of things. So this is what are the phases of economic growth. This is how the economies grow when you have new transportation. And back in grad school, when we got a lot of free time on our hands, one of my colleagues actually did a map that was really neat. As you can see, it was like a blank map of the US, and then you would see these interstates come about. It's like almost like a time exposed map. And then you'd see all the cities start growing around the interstate. And then you'd see the cities around the old freeway and the old interstate dying, and then the new ones being kind of born. So back in 2005, 2006, the Public Policy Institute of California did a study on the transportation thing in terms of economic development. So they had a couple of maps which I thought are interesting. So this was a GIS map of the land use in the San Joaquin Valley in 2000. So the orange colors that you see, agriculture. The red colors that you see there, these little things here, those are urban areas. And then you've got the different kinds of land use in terms of desert, barren land, water irrigation, wetlands, and things like that. So this was as of 2000. And you can see the interstate going through there, including, and there's 99 also. So this was in 2000. And when you look at farmland, you can kind of break it down into different things. I think one of the speakers kind of mentioned it the last session in terms of, what is of importance in terms of local importance, state importance, and this thing called the prime land. These are designations in terms of what the land can be used for. So certain of these designations, we call unique or even the prime, you can't just convert it from farmland to something else. There's a process that goes through it. So they've been designated as prime farmland. So when you talk about a new infrastructure, these are some things that have to be kept in mind. That there are certain places you just can't go based on the land use. But the interesting map for me is this one, not this one, sorry, this last one. This is the historical urbanization from 1900 to 2000. The different colors represent the different era. So you can see in 1900, if you look at Bakersfield, it's just this small green dot. And then you had Fresno, another small green dot. That green's actually 99. That's not a city, that disappeared. The lost civilization. And then there's Stockton is also another green. And then you can see with the purple, the orange, and finally, I don't know what this purple color is, but that's the urban area that I showed you earlier in 2000. Now, what the PPIC did, projected urbanization based on those theories that I mentioned, the phases that I mentioned of what urbanization would look like if they had high-speed rail. And you can see 2040, the orange areas all over here are the urban centers. Again, this is an estimate of where the track would go, and you can see if you step back, based on where the orange colors are, where they think the track would go through, the high-speed rail. Of course, if we went through here, then this would probably shift over to here. So just wanted to give some economic background in terms of geography, in terms of the impact of things. So having said that, that should maybe set up for our next speaker.
Question?
Yes.
What is the basis for this projection and estimation?
That's what
Historically, have we seen, like Spain or somewhere else, urbanization
This
like
is
this?
what the PPIC did is they looked at patterns of economic development from any infrastructure, not just related to the high-speed rail. The reason they did this one with the high-speed rail is they thought this is where it would go along the 99, and based on these models of economic growth, what the three things I talked about, substitution, the transition, and that development, that this is what they think would happen.
Well, and I'm just raising a question against these theories. If that was true, that a higher speed transportation would bring better urbanization, you would have a lot more urbanization around I-5 than you have in 99.
Sure, and that's a good point. And this is not necessarily saying that the urbanization is better. It's just that based on historical patterns of infrastructure, this is what they estimate.
So what we are doing here is looking at infrastructure in general.
Yes.
Freeways, highways, roads.
It doesn't have to be high-speed rail.
Okay.
They, in their graph, did it with high-speed rail.
Right.
But it could be another transportation here, maybe even like an Amtrak, I think what you were talking about, a better Amtrak or whatever. But this is based on their assumptions about the high-speed rail.
Okay.
And built into it, of course, as with any kind of a forecast, you have a lot of assumptions about population growth. So one of the things we talked about